Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pure Kino podcast. I'm your host, Pure Kino. And today I'm joined by another great Sopranos content creator out there. Her name is Stephanie, and she runs the great Sopranos Blueprint blog. So thank you so much for joining me, Stephanie.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
And for those who don't know, Stephanie's been featured on the Talking Sopranos podcast in and of itself, and I'd love to kind of start there because that's how I kind of became aware of you. I'd seen the Superfan episode. I was a little bit jealous that you got on there because I applied and I did not get selected. But what was it like to talk to Michael and Steve?
It was very surreal. In the moment while we were talking, of course, like looking back, a lot of it was a blur, but it was just very surreal. Because I'm used to seeing them on the screen, like seeing them, but on the show, and so being able to like speak to them live, it was
Yeah.
just, I mean, an incredible opportunity. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun.
Yeah. How when they selected you and they reached out, did they like kind of walk you through what to expect or like any kind of preparation, or was it just like, oh, you're on there and now we're talking?
Oh, right, right. So no, it was essentially after we applied, the producer reached out and wanted to have like a short interview, just probably just to kind of to narrow down. I imagine like a shorter list and make sure I wasn't like some total like weirdo that was going to go off the cuff and like go with him broke. And so then after that, he then followed up with me and said, oh, we'd like to have you on, and then we just kind of talked about the feel, and just I offered up some questions that I was going to ask, but it was it wasn't scripted or anything. It was organic, but certainly we talked about specific things that we were going to talk about, and then kind of just elaborated on those topics when we were actually on.
That's awesome. Now, did they mention anything about like, did they choose you because of your work on the blog and kind of just demonstrated that you were definitely a super fan, or was it kind of like a random, just whoever?
No, it wasn't something where they, said specifically like, "Oh, we picked because of this, this, and this." I
Hmm.
think it was more just, I guess, overall. I do think that one thing that makes me unique, and which people are always surprised about, is that I've only been watching The Sopranos since
Hmm.
March of 2020,
Yeah.
which I think is just it's something that kind of makes you feel like, huh? Um, so I think it in a way it gives me kind of a unique perspective, but also
Hmm.
like also is something that another reason why I really love hearing from fans that have been watching from the very beginning and from different years, because it's like wonderful hearing and learning different perspectives. But I think maybe they were thought that was interesting,
Yeah.
but perhaps with the blog as well. But it's just such an amazing fan base and fellow
Yeah.
people. I feel like just in the past couple of years, I've met some of my favorite people in the world, and it's I could go on and on.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think that a lot of people started watching it during COVID and stuff. You're locked down, you're at home, you got to have something to watch all day long. And a lot of people kind of rediscovered the show during that time period. And we've seen kind of, an explosion, especially because the movie came out. It's really awesome to see that kind of new life kind of breathing into a show that's, been off the air for almost like 20 years. Like, it seems like something that it would kind of fade away over time and people would lose interest, but more so than ever, like you're right, this community is so engaged, so active, and it's really a testament to just the incredible writing of the show.
I mean, even the fact that we were that Meadow Soprano was on a Super Bowl
I
commercial this year,
know.
like in 2022.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think, and that's really one of the great things about the Sopranos is once I watched for the first time. I mean, I basically haven't stopped watching because really like the rewatches, I feel like are when you kind of really like
Oh yeah.
figure it out or figure your perspective out.
Mhm.
So when I think back to the first time I watched, and I feel like I had such a superficial, basic, understanding and observations of what was going on. And it's only really like as you watch more and more, and then you start kind
Yeah.
of putting two and two together. It's so much fun, and that's why I love to continue rewatching so much.
Oh yeah, there's so much that you pick up on a second time through. Not just like hidden things, like because there are some like hidden things where you say, oh, that character is over there in the background. I didn't notice that before. But you're right. There's a lot of like just emotional nuance that a lot of people like the quintessential example, of course. A lot of people going through the first time think, oh my god, Tony Soprano, the coolest guy ever. He rocks.
You
And then
root
you
for
watch
him.
it, you root, and you still do root for him, I think, no matter what. But you start to see like, oh wait, no, you're doing something here that you really shouldn't be. You're not acting in a way that's good, even for being a mobster. And it's I think that's part of the journey that David Chase wanted us to have, is to like almost fall out of love with this character that we fell in love with, as we kind of realize, yeah, you're kind of a shitty person at times.
Right, right, and how it's just there's this duality of good and evil, but the way I see it, it's all really just along a spectrum. Like
Hmm.
there are people in the show that are mostly good, and then there are ones that are
Hmm.
are kind of good but kind of bad, and then of course all
Yeah.
the way down the line to the worst of the worst. But I
Yeah.
think depending on, or a lot of times with Tony, how we see him is relative to who he's with or who
Yeah.
his particular villain is. So it's like
Hmm.
when it was him versus Richie, and of course I could talk more about forever about Richie, but when
Yeah.
it's him versus Richie, and because Richie did something very bad, or like Ralph did something very bad, or even
Hmm.
Bill did something very bad, it I feel like enables us to kind of
Yeah.
be like, oh well, he's not that bad. But then
Yeah.
when you think about it, I mean, he's a murderer just like the
Yeah.
rest of them, and at the end of the day, he was in it for himself largely. But
And I think it's very realistic too that a lot of shows the character is either they're good or they're bad. They're a villain or they're a good guy. But in real life, people are not that simple. There are days when we do bad things. There's days when we do good things. There's days when we're kind of shitty and petty. Days when we're very noble. And I think Sopranos was really one of the first shows to show that like, oh, it's not just one or the other. Like, depending on what's going on, there's days when we're all going to be like this. And I think that's why, these murderers are so relatable, just because they deal with such like petty problems. Like, some guy insulted another guy's wife and now he's pissed off. And
mhm.
that's something that I think we all can kind of relate to on some level.
Oh, absolutely. And even like just the little things, like Tony when he went into Meadows' room and sat down on her chair, and there was like the empty ice cream bowl, like stuff that like you could just totally see that either you or someone like did, or
Hmm.
even like Carmela reminding Meadow to make her dentist appointment. Like I think
Yeah.
when I was in college, like my parents said that to me like all the time.
Yeah.
Just like so many little things, and then of course things that are happy and sad, and depending, I think, on your particular life perspective and upbringing, some certain things I think kind of stick more than others, or can resonate more than others. And that's why I think it's also something where everyone has a different favorite episode or different favorite scene or show. It's, I know there are like the kind of typical favorites, which include some of my favorites, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's such a subjective experience that what I see may be completely different from you, but that's a good
Hmm.
thing in this case.
I think so too. Like, and it really changes over time. Like when I first watched it, I was so into the gangster stuff, the crime stuff. But as I've kind of gotten older and watched it more and more times, I my favorite parts have become the family stories. Him dealing with AJ, with Meadow, with Carmela. It's so like relatable. Those just little moments of them just being husband and wife, and not even like talking, but they're just in the room together doing
Mm.
something, and
When
like
they're
you,
standing, which like
yeah,
when
you
she's lying
can.
and sitting in the bathtub, and he's
Yeah, and he's doing the stuff, and there's things that are unsaid between them, but they both know what's going on, and it's just so human and so real that, like I said, it's one of those things. Like, the older I get, even there's stuff I picked up on that I would have never even considered when I was just like a teenager watching this.
that's why it's funny because I when I was younger, when the first show when the show first came on, I was only like 9 years old, so I didn't watch it. It was kind of before my time, but my brother and my mom watched it, so I was aware of its existence, but it
Yeah,
wasn't until 2020 that I just decided to randomly flip it on. But
yeah.
it's just crazy how I feel like so much of what's done or what's said, like it kind of feels like it resonates even more today
Oh
Like I
yeah.
always think of when Dr. Melfi tells Tony about how we're living in an age of technological and spiritual crisis where there's
Yeah.
too much information and input of every kind. I'm like, imagine if if only they could see 2022.
I know, it's so crazy, like how much they predicted, how much like the problems that they dealt with back then have only maybe gotten worse in a lot of ways. And I think that that's that line that he has in the very first episode where he says, I feel like I came in at the end, you know, the best times
Hmm.
are over. I think a lot of people really feel that way, and it's something that you know David Chase, I'm sure, felt in the '60s when he was a kid, you know,
And
growing up.
Johnny Boy Sperano thought it too. Remember, he wanted
Yeah,
to get in Reno. He wanted to get in on the ground floor.
exactly, and it's like almost every generation kind of feels that way, that things are just getting worse. And yeah, I think it's why like a lot of like young people are getting into this show now, and it's wonderful to see.
Yeah, and like with Livia, when she says like depressed, what's he got to be depressed about? And it makes me think of like the old baby boomer generation. That's like in my
Hmm.
day, I walked 10 miles to school,
I
like
know.
stuff like that. Which is also, yeah, just Livia is she's amazing.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
amazing in the evil way, but amazing.
Well, an amazing actress, you know, like just all these, even the villains were so convincing, so incredible, just incredible performances.
And I sometimes like when I first disliked, like for example, Feach was someone for the
Oh,
reason
Feast
I didn't
Wallace.
like him at all at first. I was like, this guy is like what a douche. But then I began to really appreciate him and understand like
Yeah,
that Feach was Feach, like that was him,
yeah.
and now I find him hilarious.
I know.
Um,
Even the pieces of shit like Ralphie, Ralphie's probably the most disgusting human being on the show. He's still incredibly funny. Like just the lines he says, it's just so entertaining to watch that you forget for a moment you are like horrible. The things you did to people are unforgivable. You
though
know?
I do think that there was the nuance in whoever did this, which is it's like one of my favorite episodes where the thing that happened with Justin and then
Yeah.
his apology to Rowan. Of course,
Hmm.
I'm not saying that he actually
Yeah.
oh he's redeemed by that. I mean, what he did
Hmm.
to Tracy is unforgivable, but I don't think he started the fire though. I don't think he was behind the fire.
So it's
Oh, we
interesting
would
that
have to get into that debate, though. Not that I was trying to,
no,
but
no,
I
no,
just
no,
thought I
no.
had to bring it up since it was whoever did this.
No, it was so interesting because I read behind the scenes stuff for that episode that David Chase refused to tell Joey Pants, the actor, if he
Hmm.
did it or not, and so Joey like decided as an actor, like I'm gonna play it like he didn't do it. That was his kind of acting. Later on during Talking Sopranos, David Chase just offhandedly said, "Oh yeah, Ralph did it," which I don't like. That I don't like that. I want it open for debate, because personally, I also thought he didn't do it. Also,
Well, and also that was like I feel like kind of the reason the vague and the those questions that aren't going to be is able to be answered. I feel like that's kind of the spirit of the show. So it's almost
yeah,
like uncharacteristic
yeah,
of it as a whole.
and it also undercuts a little bit the fact that Tony didn't just kill him over the horse; he killed him because of Tracy too. And
Right.
he's
Right.
banging his head. He's like, she was a beautiful, innocent
Oh
creature.
yeah, that
So
always
there's
gets me.
all
And when
this
he sees her at the
nuance.
picture afterwards,
Yeah,
it's that's really that's very that last ending scene where he walks out. I feel like it's kind of his like start his trot to hell. That's beginning, but I guess that's
yeah,
really but yeah, that's certain scenes are just so powerful like that when there's just so
hmm,
much going on that's said and unsaid.
yeah. I think,
It's
yeah, I mean, there's so many fantastic endings like that. Of course, like we talked before a little bit about, the fan favorites, like, White Caps. Of course, everyone loves Pine
which
Barrens.
is funny because I'm wearing this Pine Barren shirt, but Pine
I
Barren is
know.
actually not one of my favorites.
I'm curious, 'cause I don't expect you to have like one favorite because I don't have one favorite, but I'm curious, like off the top of your head, like the first thought that comes into your head, what episode kind of immediately comes to mind?
So I like to think of these as like my Sopranos comfort food episodes, and it's funny because I was thinking in my head because I figured that you would ask me what my favorite episode or episodes were. So I'd have to say overall, if I had to pick one, it would be College, which
That's a
I
good
know is
one.
also a popular favorite one. But I just the different parallel things going on is just it's definitely my probably the one that I've watched the most and also
Hmm.
my favorite. But then I also most episodes of season 2 I love. Season 2 happens to be my personal favorite.
Mine too.
uh, but others that are not in season 2, I'd say I really love To Save Us All from Satan's Power.
That's
And
a
I
good
think that
one.
it's overshadowed by Pine Barrens, unfortunately, and that it doesn't
Yeah.
get the credit that it's due. Whoever did this, I really like All Happy Families, for whatever reason. And then, um, there's others, but of course, with season two with Toodaloo and Happy Wanderer, I would say that is one of my other favorites.
Yeah.
What about
I really
yours?
like season two as well. I think that's my favorite season because it has kind of the lighthearted happiness sort of the early seasons before it got really dark, but you still got, a lot of the conflict brewing. Richie is my favorite villain of the whole show. I absolutely adore his performance. And
And then
my
Janice comes in
favorite
season two, also.
Janice, of course. That's, I mean, a critical character. And my favorite episode for personal reasons is From Where to Eternity. Just because I have such great memories of watching that episode with my friends on my birthday. It was it was awesome to see that. And so I'll always cherish that episode just for the outside
Nostalgic
memories.
value, also.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many reasons to like different episodes. You can like it for the quality of the episode, the great drama, or you can just like it because some fun stuff happens in it that you just enjoy watching.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then of course there are like the few that are the less popular, but I think that all of the episodes there's something in every one of them that's valuable. Like I know
Yeah,
a lot of people D Girl's not their favorite. I won't say it's my favorite either, but I do like that it touches on those existentialist concepts with
yeah,
AJ. And then also in Camelot, I think Junior does a great performance, and I think that's sometimes overshadowed when kind of people just think of
yeah.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Yeah, I really don't hate any episode of this show. The only one I kind of would maybe not care to rewatch often is like A Hit is a Hit from season one. Don't think that one's the best, but I think all those other episodes have great moments in them that are like, I mean, the scene where, Pussy's crying in the bathroom because he's betraying his friends and D Girl. I thought that was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the whole kind of storyline in Camelot where Tony kind of learns to appreciate his mother a little bit more, that
Mm-hmm.
for all her faults, she quit smoking when the dad got emphysema and this woman didn't. Like that was a
Right.
nice little touch that I was like, that's a cool moment,
And also showed one of the like really bad sides of Johnny Boy also, because
Hmm.
it wasn't just that he was a gangster, like it showed how personal side of how about like who he was personally.
Yeah,
And the fact that he would then try to have his son lie
yeah,
about him, and so that because he didn't want to go to go to the hospital when she was
yeah.
having a miscarriage.
And then
I
Tony at the end chooses to not like he chooses to go with the lie basically that it was all his mother, it was all her fault because it's just easier than facing the reality that like his father was not a role model for him to live up to, but he just can't really accept that. And so when he's lying to his friends at the end about how hot this woman was and how great his dad was, it was like just some very brilliant nuance there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think I remember when she first when she started criticizing Livia, and
Hmm.
so she looked like a statue, which kind of reminded me of the statue in
Oh,
Dr.
of
Malfoy's
course,
office.
yeah.
But that's but anyway, it was like it's one of those things where it's like you can insult your family, but then like if someone else then insults your, it's like wait, no, like like
Especially
so.
since she turned out to be, kind of a gold digger in many ways, like getting money from Tony, but then spending it on clothes and stuff rather than taking care of what he gave her the money for. It's like, he slowly starts to realize she's a very shitty person, and
Oh yeah, and like at the restaurant where he was trying to tell her about something serious, and then she was like, "Oh,
she,
so we're gonna order this." It reminded
yeah,
me of
refused.
Valentina when Tony was talking to her about Ralph's kid, and then she's
Well,
like, "I'm gonna order the veal medallion."
Well, it's very much like him too, because whenever someone tried to talk to him on the show about a problem they were having, he'd always cut them off because
Oh yeah, like
he,
Angelo Triffitt. He's
yeah,
like, "I'm gonna take my
exactly.
grandson to the park," and he's like, "Oh, we're here
Yeah,
now."
yeah. Or Gigi is talking about his bowel problems or whatever. He's like, hey, just relax. You're doing a good. Like he just didn't want to ever hear anyone else's problems, but he forced everyone to listen to. It's very, very real though. Too, a lot of people are like that. They just want
Oh,
to.
absolutely. A lot of people are like, "Do as I say, not as I do," in terms
Yeah,
of like. But that reminds me. It makes me think of Paulie too, where the cop, where he's like, "Hey, I got my own fucking problem."
they're all like that. I mean, it's such. It's so again real that like they're mobsters but they're people at the end of the day with their like very petty, very selfish, narcissistic problems that a lot of us face every single day.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, it's I think that we all can relate to just feeling like your life's kind of a puzzle, and being what's all this really about. Certainly over the
Hmm.
past couple of years, when it feels like there's been kind of more tragedy and more shit than ever.
Hmm.
I think I definitely find myself asking a lot of those like questions, and thinking about those existential issues that come up a lot on the show.
No, most definitely. I'd love to kind of take it back because I feel like we maybe skipped over this at the beginning, but I want to talk about the Sopranos Blueprint.
Oh,
How did that come about for you? I know you told the story on Talking Sopranos, but I'd love to hear it again here.
yeah.
What kind of prompted you to pursue that and create that?
So I think it was when I was like in my sixth rewatch, which I had literally like finished Made in America, then started over to pilot. Like
Starting
that
right
kind of went
over.
straight through. And I think like after my maybe sixth rewatch, I had so many thoughts and things that I wanted to write about, just things that really resonated with me. So I kind of just like I started writing them in Microsoft Word, but then I was like, oh, maybe I should just put this online or something. And then it was like just a little tiny thing with that had like a couple of different blog posts that like I barely knew how to even like use WordPress. But then I just kept, the more I watched, like the more thoughts I had and the more I wanted to write. And then I was like, "Ah, I should just kind of like make a thing out of this. And so then I created it, and made it, or completed it. And started just adding more blog posts. And then a couple months later, that's when I all of a sudden I wanted to like do something new, and take it in another direction. And then I just randomly decided one day to like create trivia.
Yeah.
So it was all very like kind of off the cuff, just as it happened. But so then after I figured my first quiz, it kind of went a little bit viral, and I was just like, oh, this is pretty fun. And so then like fast forward today, I've probably made like over 120 quizzes, and then from there I started doing like crossword puzzles and then
Yeah.
videos, and I kind of just like to be creative with it however I
Yeah.
can.
No, that's incredible. Did you have like a history of like writing or content creation before this, or was it just completely brand new to you?
So in terms of writing professionally, yes, but not in terms of like pop culture or TV show. It was very, very new to me. Like there are
Yeah.
still many shows that I actually haven't watched that I know um, are ones that kind of get similar acclaim. A
Yeah.
couple of which I just haven't like been able to get into. Not because I'm not saying they're bad, but just
Yeah.
it didn't connect with me. 1/10 as much as it
Oh
did with
yeah.
the Sopranos. It's kind of like everything's been ruined. Like my standards have been ruined ever since I watched The Sopranos, because it's like it's nearly impossible
Of
for
course.
something to compare. But yeah, I mean, it's just the more that I watched, the more thoughts I had about it, the more I
Mhm.
wanted to say, and particularly the more like patterns and connections I found.
Yeah.
It was just so much fun engaging and sharing that stuff with others, um, which kind of was a surprise because like I said, I hadn't been doing really any content creation or in that area
That
before.
no, that makes total sense to me because I was the same way. Like when I watched the show, I just had all these thoughts that I wanted to share with people, but either they hadn't seen the show or they watched it, and then I would try to talk to them about like, hey, I think this episode thematically means this, and they're like, I don't care. I just watched the
Yeah,
show.
there's like the
Uh,
guns and like gabagool and guns.
Yeah, exactly. And during COVID or whatever, I was bored out of my mind. I wasn't working at that time, and I was like, let's just try making a video. I could put these thoughts, on video, and maybe 100 people will watch it. And then luckily, a lot more people did than that, and we formed this kind of Sopranos community around these video topics. I broke down every episode of the show. And yeah, it's been awesome to be able to do stuff like this, was just reach out to other Sopranos creators. I've had Borco, the quintessential clip poster. I've had Sopranos theories on, and like we were talking a little bit before the episode started. There's not too many of us making new stuff about this show. It's compared to something like Breaking Bad, which has like 100,000 channels dedicated
Which
to
is,
it.
and I didn't really get into. To be honest, that was
Yeah,
just to name drop. That was one of the
I
shows
got you.
I was thinking of. No offense, no
No,
offense.
no, of course. But yeah, like we are saying, it was just like there's not too many of us, and it's always nice to meet other people and like again try to breathe more life into this community, into this show, because it is just one of the most fantastic communities out there.
100%. One of the a woman that I became friends with and connected with on Twitter through The Sopranos. She's one of my close friends now. We actually ended up meeting in person
That's
like a
awesome.
couple of years later, and
Yeah.
and on a few others that I'm very close with. But yeah, it's like and it's such a contrast because I feel like when people talk about social media and online, they talk about all the toxic, the all the noise, so to speak.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like it's an oasis,
Yeah.
and so it's just an interesting having a different experience for most people.
Yeah, I think the people get the wrong idea sometimes about the Sopranos community because, the show has things that are like, oh, they say something and it's like it's mean or it's a racist or whatever, but you understand that like it's not meant to be like these are mobsters, right? They do bad things, and so when they say something like that, you're meant to understand. Oh, this is not the show's not encouraging this. It's just like this is what someone in that lifestyle would act like.
Right, exactly. We're not condoning or endorsing Tony's racist behavior with Noah and Uncle Ben's
Mhm,
rice, or their homophobia toward Vito, which
mhm,
something I was thinking about the other day because I was watching Cold Stones again, like the fact that they couldn't even recognize him when they were after he was killed. To me,
yeah,
that was like just showed the ultimate sign of disrespect because usually in all these mirrors they're like not nothing above the neck. We want them to be able to have an open casket.
yeah.
So to me, like the fact that they did that they added that little detail in there was helpful, and that's something else I love about the show. Like just the writing and just like all the little nuances
Mhm.
and details and patterns that I noticed among different characters. Um, yeah, it's just
And especially talk about the nuance of that storyline. Tony, despite maybe making a joke here and there, he straight up tells Melfi like, I don't really care that Vito's gay. I don't want to kill him over this. It doesn't matter to me. At the end of the day, all I want to do is make money. Whatever this guy wants to do in the bedroom, that's his business. But because of their kind of culture and their like he's got to you got to put on a front. He can't just outright say like, I don't care about this. Phil, on the other hand, is so like die hard, like he's got to die. But there's also a kind of nuance to that. Some people read that it might be that he has a little bit of that like internal homophobia
right.
because of his own sexuality. There's all this hidden like jokes and dialogues. The fact that he comes out of the closet
Oh yeah,
when he goes to Vito.
when he's sitting
Um,
on the bed, he's almost
yeah,
like
is ripping it. Yeah.
well, and another thing I think that more speaks to him also kind of trying to project certain feelings is when his wife Patty was talking about how Vito has to pay for his sins, and Phil's kind of like rolling his eyes like, oh yeah, like I know. To me, I'm like it almost showed like it's Phil's just kind of acting it too, like because
Mhm.
even he's then getting sick of his own wife talking about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think they had to put on a show and
Yeah.
project this. The rules, which is like, I don't think any of them knew the actual rules were. They just pretended they knew what the rules were, and then like pretended that they were actual rules. But yeah, I think it's with those issues, it's something to for people to not admire, to learn
Yeah.
from. Like this is not,
Yeah.
it's the things that made us know that they were not good people, despite whatever good qualities they may have had.
Oh yeah, and you talk about the rules and like how they're all like, oh yeah, we were honorable, we followed tradition. Then meanwhile, all of them break the rules, for their own gain. They all either turn rat or they kill people they're not supposed to kill, or they steal from each other and stuff like that. So we understand that they're all hypocrites and liars, but that's why it's so fun to watch because they'll smile to themselves and be like, oh yeah, we're brothers, we love each other, and then meanwhile they're plotting to kill each other behind their backs. So it's just so funny to see that.
Yeah, and it's so like just the whole psychology of it, like with Tony, with like knowing that his own mother and not to mention his uncle tried to have him killed. And then to think, like, I don't know if he ever put two and two together, but that Janice wanted to have him killed in season two.
Yeah.
Um, it's just, you know, I mean, like, to just have like that sort of burden. I mean, I'm not surprised that he, you know, had all the anxiety that he did. It's
Oh yeah.
just, it's unfortunate that, you know, it always got to that point with Melfi
Mhm.
where, you know, they couldn't go any further, which I understand why, obviously, because he, you know, of the industry that he was in. But,
Mhm.
um, like in Calling All Cars, when she talks about, like, now that the panic attacks are gone, we can go into like what you're really after and your short time on earth. And it
Mhm.
makes me just think about like life in general. But, um,
Oh, that
yeah,
part is so relatable too because like even he knows that like the mafia makes him miserable. Like he would be so much happier, and we see this you know in season one before he's boss. We see him like just so much happier. Like he looks so much better. And as he gets the power and the money, it all like all the stress just kind of ruins his life. But even after the coma, and he says like I'm gonna change. I'm gonna appreciate life. He just kind of slides right back into his old lifestyle. And I think again that's just how people are. Like we all are like, oh, you know, I'm gonna work less, I'm gonna take more vacations, I'm gonna smell the roses. And then, you know, next week we're like, well, you know, I got bills to pay, I want to buy this new car, I want to buy this, you know. It's like we always kind of focus on that stuff more than, you know, the simple things in life. And it's
right.
so
We regress
relatable.
back into like things that we're familiar with that
Yeah.
like even, you know, we need to repeat what's familiar even if it's
Yeah.
bad for us. um and that also makes me think of when Tony, this was after he got out of the hospital. I think it was in either um Mr. and Mrs. John Sacramone or Live Free or Die. But Tony went to sit outside like in the backyard in the pool, and he was like all relaxed, and then the AC unit started making a noise, and it was like then automatically he was so frustrated and so annoyed. And it was just really like an example of how like you're not really to step, you know, taking a moment to
Yeah.
smell the roses. You're kind of just, you know, every little inconvenience is a
Yeah.
huge insult.
And I mean, but it is real that like, you know, he has a line I think where he says, maybe it was even in an episode, like, you know, you can talk about smelling the roses and taking life, you know, as it comes, but real life has a way of picking away at it.
Mhm.
And it's like, you know, it's true that like all the stuff we have to deal with, you know, our bills, like our got to start thinking about, you know what how you're going to take care of yourself in the future, all of that, and it forces you to really be like not have fun and just really think about like, you know, okay, what am I gonna what I'm gonna do next? What's my next accomplishment going to be?
Right.
And again, I just think that they really hit the nail on the head of what life everywhere is like, but really specifically in America, like just our constant need to like buy stuff, to, you know, to work hard, like that just is such a cultural, you know, thing that we all go through.
It's like it reminds me of what when Svetlana says, you know, you're it's the trouble with you Americans. You
Yeah.
expect nothing bad to happen, whereas we expect everything bad to
Yeah.
happen, and we're never disappointed.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's always like very kind of impactful when
Hmm.
I hear that. But um, yeah, I think it's, you know, it's also, yeah, it's like you're always kind of like, oh, where's the next like destination? What's the next like thing?
Hmm.
You know, to avoid like boredom. Which I know that Tony and they bring up a couple different
Yeah.
times, about being bored. And then, you
Hmm.
know, what's the purpose? I like House Arrest is I want an episode that I really like
That's
because
a
I really
great
like the
episode.
conversations. And then also the end scene with Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory. I really love
Yeah.
that is too.
Yeah, that episode was so great because you know, they talked about the fact that boredom, like Tony can't sit by himself because he'll start to think about all the bad stuff he's done, and that's why he's always trying to distract himself with like food and sex and money, and like it's always just to stop himself from thinking about his life. And you know, even though we're not all murderers and stuff like him, we do, I think, try to not really think about those deep questions a lot of time because it bothers us, and now we distract ourselves with like, you know, I'm gonna watch this show, I'm gonna buy this thing or whatever. And that ending, you're right, is one of the happiest moments of the show when they're all together for once, and it's contrasted at the end of season 6 when it's just Paulie by himself because everyone else has died or become a rat or whatever.
Which is so funny because it's so ironic how in the first episode of season 2, and Janice was like, Jesus Christ, is that Paulie Gualtieri? Isn't he dead yet? And it's like,
He's the
actually,
only
no,
one.
he's not. He never died.
Yeah.
Paulie's very, very interesting character.
Mhm.
Um, it's kind of interesting how they, I like to read about like the backstory and how the different, David Chase and the writers, how they made decisions or didn't make decisions. I think a lot of the things that I think are connections are probably just things that I might be connecting in my head. But I do think it was interesting how, like, they kind of the first couple seasons had Paulie as like sort of a, not a ladies' man, but like, he had his Gumars. But then after season 2, it was just like, I don't know if it was that they, intentionally did that, but it was interesting how like the first, the season 2 opening was literally him having sex.
Yeah.
And then like after that, I don't know if
Yeah.
there's any reason they
No,
did
that
that.
makes. I think that is something intentional because, early on in those first two seasons, he's kind of more of a background character. They don't. He's not really featured prominently, but as the series went on, and I think Tony Sirico became a better actor, they started featuring him more and more, and he was able to actually give a really good performance of like being a buffoon in a lot of ways, like being comfortable being like the fool, and having the narrative kind of make fun of him in a lot of ways. And by the end, he's one of the main cast that like people are really tuning into his storylines there. So I think he really grew as an actor over the course of the series.
And it's interesting with him because he when I think of Paulie, he's one of the funniest characters. His lines and his mannerisms are just you know it's hard to really put in words. It's something you can only understand if you see it. But then you also, the more you watch, the more then you kind of realize bad things that he's
Oh
done,
yeah,
and not just, well, I mean, killing a senior citizen. That's obviously killing a Min Matrone as as much of a whatever as she was. But then also just his talking behind Tony's back with Johnny Sack.
oh
And
yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised personally if Paulie knew about the hit
oh
on
yeah,
Tony at the end. I think he. I guess we don't have to. We can get this another time, but I think that he did have an agreement with Butchie, which is why Butchie's like, management. Paulie got theory. No,
yeah,
it just that's to me kind of what I took away. But
oh
but
yeah,
then it's like you have these contrasts because he's also hilarious. So it's like
yeah.
both.
It's one of those things that I think Paulie's the best example of this is that like they can lie to everyone, including themselves. Like Paulie, I feel like really did love Tony. Like he looked up to him, like wanted to impress him, wanted to be around him, but was also okay betraying him and like going against his back. And I think in his head, there's no kind of disconnect there. It's like because again they can lie to themselves as well as they lie to everyone around them. And Paulie was a traitor and schemed behind Tony's back, but at the same time, when they're at the Bing or whatever hanging out, he was the biggest kiss ass, the biggest sycophant among them. And I don't think in his mind there's any kind of contradiction there.
That's true, because and especially with him, because he wasn't married and didn't have kids, like that wouldn't be necessarily contradictory, like him always having himself like at the forefront and number
Oh
one,
yeah,
because he it was just him.
yeah.
uh, but it's, yeah, they're interesting. I really loved Still also,
Oh, of course.
which it's,
What?
I love how he ended up getting the role, like having no prior
Yeah,
acting
no
experience.
acting
Just
experience. Yeah,
perfect.
and he really grew as an actor too, to the point where he got his own series afterwards,
Oh yeah,
Lilyhammer, on
Lilyhammer, yeah.
Netflix, that some people think is like a
His coma dream.
Sopranos is Coma Dream. I watched a little bit of it. I was like, if it's a dream, maybe that explains why the writing is not nearly as good. But it's still fun, and yeah, I think Silvio, again, really grew as an actor and like came into his own in the show to the point where there are a couple episodes where like he's the star. Like
Oh
when
yeah,
Tony's
for
in the coma, and he's having
Mhm.
his like panic attacks. Like it's great.
Oh yeah, it's interesting how with Sil, how they kind of experimented with him. I feel like in the first season, like Boca, which is actually one of my other favorite episodes, because it's just, I don't know, I love it, and I used to play soccer, so I think there's like the personal soccer touch. But he was he was kind of pretty like family oriented kind of in that first season. Like, you see him at the volleyball game and then the soccer
Yeah.
games and all into that. So I think that was perhaps one of the things that they, changed with him. But yeah, he was, just did a great job.
And it's interesting when you think of him because he's one of the most like you don't really see him do anything really bad throughout most of the series. Like he's not really doing too many murders. He's not being an asshole most of the time. But then you see him do something like, he smacks Tracy across the face when she talks back to him, and then he takes out Adriana in long term parking, and you're like, oh, even the quiet ones, the ones who are like, you feel like, oh, I could be with Silvio, like he's not crazy like Ralphie. Even this guy is a cold blooded murderer when it comes to it. Like if push comes to shove, they're all capable of doing whatever they have to do.
Right. Oh, that episode is always so like it always makes me think like at what point did Adriana know? Like obviously once they were pulling up in the forest, but like
Yeah,
kind of on the highway, I'm like, at
I
what
think
time
she
did
knew
she
even
realize?
then.
Because
That's
I
why
think
she's
it was
having
just,
that little fantasy of going away. Like she's
oh my, that
realizing, like,
kills
I
me.
shouldn't have gotten in the car.
And the song is so good too. It's just it's so like that episode as a whole. I feel bad for Adriana.
I have,
Christopher should have given her more like prep, like almost like this is your prep for if the FBI or the cops
yeah,
ever come and talk to you. Don't
I
talk to
have,
them.
I have so much sympathy for Adriana. I know some people in the community don't. They're like, oh, she was a rat or whatever. But like, she was manipulated by the FBI. They lied to her. They tricked her into doing it. She's not, blameless in anything. She did commit her own crimes, but she was absolutely loyal to Christopher.
She's so
Loved him, and he threw it all away for Tony Soprano, the man who would later kill him. Like, and you got to imagine in that moment as he realizes what Tony's doing to him, he's like, I fucked up. Like, I really should have just gone away with her. I should not have chosen this man.
Oh, 100%. He's thinking to when he was, taking her suitcase and tossing it into the woods. He's like, and you can tell even like in season 6. I mean, obviously he brings her up, but also like when he comes back from California Luxury Lounge and he has like the little purse and he's like for a pocket dog. Like he
Yeah.
could like tell just he I think he really was just another thing that he resented Tony for.
Oh
Um,
yeah, he hated Tony by the end, and Christopher made his own choices and made his own
oh yeah, I
mistakes
mean
without a doubt. But even him, you can have some sympathy for because there's scenes where it's like him and Tony B are bullying him, and he's just kind of crying in the car afterwards, and it's like you're a mobster, but that stuff still hurts. When you think your friends, people you
oh
think are your
yeah, of
friends,
course.
stab
When
you
he
in the back.
and they were and some of the stuff that they were saying like at the end with Paulie when he was talking about his infant daughter and he's like she's like she's looking up and thinking oh too bad it wasn't adopted
Well,
like that's
or
just oh she's gonna work at the
saying
big
she's gonna work at the Bing,
like
yeah, it's like.
that's just like that's to anyone like regardless of what circumstance they were in that would really piss them off and really
Oh
upset them
yeah,
so there was just a time bomb and I wasn't too thrilled with how JT acted. I mean I know he was like I don't know maybe just kind of towing the line with what he was supposed to do, but it was just I feel like he could have been more sympathetic there. But I get it's complicated because they had kind of going back and forth.
yeah. I mean, Christopher again. He like everyone else, like took advantage of his friends and betrayed Tony in many ways too. And again, like none of
He
these
would have been killed.
people.
Although if he weren't Tony's nephew, he would have been killed a long time ago.
Yeah,
like,
and just acted shitty in his own way, and like all these characters, it's like you can have sympathy for them, and you can also realize that what they've done is, just incredibly horrible, and they have what's coming to them.
and then a lot of people are hypocrites, even as much as I think of college with like Father Phil, and then he comes back then in season 5 and like makes her feel like she's just like so evil for like being with someone else.
I
Meanwhile, he was
know.
like basically trying to do the same thing with her. Which when you think about it, I can't imagine the idea of Father Phil or any man spending the night at their house like once it's like season 4 or 5. Like, can you imagine like Tony coming back in season 5 and finding out
Oh
the
my
father Phil slept over?
god, it
Like,
would have ripped him apart.
that would have just not been a good situation. But I
I
guess, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I love the scene where she confronts him about what he does, and she's like, "I think you do this on purpose. You get close enough where you can kind of have a thrill, but then pull back at the last minute, and
Right.
you use to get free stuff, and he's just like blown away that someone called him out on his shitty behavior, and
Mhm,
of
he's
course
seriously thirsty.
Carmela's not blameless in this too. She was looking for something. She wanted to get back at Tony for all of his cheating, and she wanted to have her own. She's like that with all the men who came into the house, like
Oh,
Furio
yeah.
or the contractor. But it was still so awesome to see a character just called out like that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and Carmela, I don't, this is one of the things that I also don't know if they did on purpose, but it always reminds me of it. Um, when Mr. Regular talks about Madame Bovary, and he talks about, that she's trapped in this, bourgeois, and she has all this excitement in her, but she, feels like she's stuck in this world. It makes me think of Carmela. And
Oh
then
yeah.
also when they say when he says the book is horrifically funny though tragic, it just makes me think of The Sopranos as a whole.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely intentional, that connection there. And again, that's another character too that he was very slimy. He was very much like you could tell he was looking for this too, like looking to kind of make his way into here. And of course, she manipulated him too, to get AJ's grades up. So, what I love so much about the show is that none of these characters are blameless. They all have an agenda. They're all trying to get something that they want, and it's fun to see how
Mhm.
their interactions play out.
All right. Yep. And even the kids too. Like with Meadow, she
Mhm.
and Tony have a lot had a lot in common.
Yeah,
Even like and especially like others' misfortune being good for them. Like
yeah,
how when Eric Scatino didn't play, she
yeah,
got to do her solo, which she
yeah,
wanted. So it was like another things like that. And then of course in Tony's case when he kills Christopher,
yeah,
his luck changes.
yeah. The kids again. That's another characters who I feel like the community doesn't like them on first watch because they are bratty in a lot of ways. But I have grown to absolutely love AJ and like really sympathize with him, and the absolute horrible way he was raised. Like of course he's bratty, but Tony spoils him. So what do you expect? Like he's a kid, and he's constantly being rewarded for not doing well. And suddenly they have at the end they have the balls to be like, why aren't you working harder in school? Because you never taught him, to work for himself or to work hard. He was always given the easy way out. And a few times he tries, he gets smacked down. So it's like, it's.
Right.
I have a lot of sympathy for AJ.
Yeah, he got so much contradictory kind of, guidance because on one hand, his father was like this, but then he
Hmm.
didn't want AJ to be like that. But then it's like, wait, why not? So then everything that they would tell him about, being good and doing things right, it's like he knew that they were hypocrites. And same thing with Meadow. Obviously, they,
Hmm.
acted out in different ways. But I mean, I know I was a brat to my parents at times,
Yeah,
so I've had a bunch of those fans. I'm like, were you never like that to your parents? And
yeah.
again, not like it was good. And I personally, I got really frustrated with AJ in season 5 when
Mhm.
he was like being rude to Carmela. But I think like in season 6, and particularly when he started, focusing on those heavier issues,
Yeah.
I definitely felt for him.
Yeah, I mean, and he suffers from the same, genetic depression that Tony does, but he just doesn't have an outlet the way that Tony does to like, Tony beats up people when he's sad, he kills people, he does whatever. AJ just has to kind of live with it, and of course he's a whiny baby, that's just again how they raised him. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that again, it's one of those things where it's like the more you watch it, the more layers you unpack, and you can kind of sympathize with characters in ways you couldn't before and judge them in ways you couldn't before. But that's just why I understand why you binge watch the show, constantly just straight through because it really does reward repeat viewing in a way that I don't think any other TV show really does.
It doesn't. There's not so much like the value that you get in watching more. Although most of the time now, I think after like my 10th rewatch, I started kind of going like just for random. So nowadays, usually what I'll do is I'll just go like from episode to episode.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like one that I really like, or I'll just like be like, oh, let me find like a random episode and I'll
Yeah.
put it on. But every once in a while, I'll still do the straight
Yeah.
through rewatch. But it at this point, I'm like, it's all the same
I
anyway. But
know.
it's yeah, it's still enjoyable
I
watching.
think I think that's also one of the things that makes it so great is that it's not like where every episode directly leads into the next, right? It's like you can play an episode just randomly out of order and you can understand it because they're kind of more self-contained stories that are
Hmm.
just again just focused on the characters, focused on the theme of that episode, and it's not where it's like, oh, you have to watch what happened before, or else you're not going to understand it. It's not like a soap opera, you know.
Right, where
Uh,
like you don't right exactly like you could. I think of college as like the prime example. How like you could know nothing about that world, and then you start fresh when Meadow asks her father if he's in the mafia, and then
yeah.
you'll understand like what's happening on the show. You wouldn't have to have any sort of backstory.
Yeah,
Um,
I often tell people like if you're get like where should you start on The Sopranos? I often don't think you should start on episode one, because I think it like season one is good, but it gets way better later on. And if you kind of watch maybe the first few episodes, you might be bored. There are some people who react that way, and so I often say watch Pine Barrens. I think that's a you don't need to really understand the plot. To there's not like real narrative overarching narratives that are going to get spoiled. Just watch that. It's funny, it's kind of indicative of the show, and I think you'll fall in love and then you'll want to watch the whole thing straight through.
yeah, it's interesting those certain shows that like for whatever reason or the certain episodes that people get really into and a lot of times it's something you can't even really explain. Like if someone was like, oh, why is this your favorite episode or why is this one of your favorite episodes? It's not something where I can like there'll be like a concrete like articulable list. Like it's
Yeah.
just you kind of just have to see it for yourself. But yeah, it's hard. It's crazy though, just how much of a like I because like I said, I was not someone that did like pop culture. Like I just
Yeah.
kind of fell in love like right from the start. Um, but yeah, certainly there are changes, like especially with the pilot,
Yeah.
with even the different location and the
Yeah.
different Irina and different Father Phil
Yeah.
and but it's just cool seeing now the kids specifically how they develop and how they change and how
Oh
everything
yeah.
kind of comes full circle.
It's hard to put into words what's so great about this show because people will ask like, "Oh, what's so great about The Sopranos?" And then you start to think about it and you're like, "I can't even say." It's just so good. There's so many things that you kind of just have to watch and experience it. It's magical in a way, and
Oh,
um,
absolutely.
it's also really funny. Like you will be there's deep themes, but it's not like reading a boring book. It's like you will be entertained as you go through this. They're doing fun stuff, but there's also this deep like underlayer of themes and character that you will again appreciate more the more you watch it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like just even using Meadow and Tony as an example, like their college dinner and then their dinner that they had at the very last episode where Meadows kind of transformed because
Yeah,
first she was very cynical and skeptical about oh your Italian thing and then at the end
yeah,
she's then defending it and even Tony
yeah.
thinks skeptical.
I know.
It's
It shows that he's almost corrupted her in a way. He always wanted her to not be connected to the mafia at all, and now she's going down a career path where she's going to defend guys like him. She's going to be in this world, and he's sad that it reminds me a lot of The Godfather, and of course, the show takes a lot of influence from The Godfather, where Vito at the end was like, "I never wanted this life for you. I wanted you to be a senator, a doctor, whatever."
mhm,
And
right,
Tony
right.
was just there just wasn't enough time.
And then with the one of my favorite ending scenes, and it made me think of stuff with the Godfather with the whole with the church. But the end of stage 5 with evidently Chicken Town is just like
Yeah,
one of my favorite episode
the
endings.
baptism.
Um, and I love it with no more, but more of this, and then just
Yeah,
everything, and with the foreshadowing for Tony and Christopher. Yeah, it's I could go on forever,
I know.
forever and ever.
Every one of these episodes, we could have like an hour long discussion.
Oh, for
Just talking
sure.
about all the nuances. Um, But yeah, I know we're coming up on our hour here. I know it's getting late for you on the East Coast. I will say thank you for joining me on this podcast. It was awesome to talk to another Sopranos super fan. You obviously have, an incredible breadth of knowledge for the series, and it's always nice to meet another Sopranos creator.
Awesome. Yeah, likewise. I'm glad we got to do this. I'd certainly, love to come on again in the future if you'd like me to.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Pure Kino podcast coming. I don't know when. Talk to you guys later.
Oh, and if they want to find my vlog,
Oh,
sopranosblueprint.com.
I'm of course going to link your
Oh, no. Oh, no, no, no.
blog, your channel, everything. It's going to be in the description of this video. But thank you for reminding me, guys. Go check out her stuff. It's fantastic. You can never get enough
And
Sopranos
yours too.
content.
And you're-
Exactly. So again, thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a good night.